This has been a big problem in the church in the last 30 years. Churches have split over it, and young people and old people have left the church over this issue, and that is young earth creationism versus old earth creationism, because these worldviews cannot coexist within Christianity. The motive for this speech is all Christians need knowledge of this. We need to be able to encounter both worldviews at the same time and be able to judge for ourselves which one is the most likely was intended from Scripture. My credibility statement, I have done much research on this topic. I've read numerous books and written numerous papers on this topic, and I've also spoken to professionals, like a professional geologist who has dedicated his whole life to researching young earth creationism and finding evidence for it. My thesis statement is that young earth creationism has more biblical and scientific evidence than its opposing view, old earth creationism. So, to support this, my first point is evolution could not have taken place in Genesis. This is because in Genesis, to have evolution, you would have had death before the fall of man, because God created man in his own image. So Adam and Eve looked just like you and me, human. And in order for them to evolve from something else, it would have required death before the fall of Adam, which is not just. And our God is a just God, and it would be against his character to have unjustified death before sin, because death was a consequence of sin. And some people will argue that it was not physical death, but spiritual death that was intended in Genesis after the fall of man. But this can be easily disproven by Romans 5:12, which says, just as sin entered the world and death through sin, we can see this too from taking that verse, Romans 5:12, and looking at the context and seeing that in the context it also talks about Jesus' death on the cross. And we know that Jesus' death on the cross was not merely physical, but spiritual as well. It was both. And this was pulled from a book by Ken Ham that is about Genesis and young earth creationism. And another key point that is usually brought about on this topic is the events of the sixth day were impossible. And this, according to Chaffee and Lyle, the main thing here includes that Adam could not have named all of the animals within a 24-hour time period, because it would be impossible to name each and every animal. And this is pulled also from Reasons to Believe, which is an old earth creationism organization. And it's easy to make this assumption that the events of the sixth day were impossible. But there's something you need to know. Adam did not name all of the animals in a 24-hour time period. He only named the beasts of the field, the cattle, and the birds of the air. He did not name the fish of the sea, the beasts of the earth, or the crawly things. And my third point is the Hebrew word yom used in Genesis. Yom is the word used for day, and it wasn't always referred to as a 24-hour time period. Yom can be translated as an indefinite amount of time as well, or any length of time. And old earth creationists assume that since it can be an indefinite amount of time, that they can fit millions of years into each day. But that's simply not true. We can judge this by looking at the context, which I also pulled from Chaffee and Lyle for some research, is looking at the context of Yom in Genesis. We see that every time Yom is used, it is paired with evening and morning, because even in the English translation, we see on each day of creation, it happened there was an evening and a morning of the given day. And in conclusion, I have gone over why old earth creationism, or young earth creationism, has more biblical and scientific evidence than old earth creationism. And this is because the events of day 6 were possible. Each creation day was a literal 24 hours. And death could not have happened before sin, so evolution cannot take place in Genesis. And I challenge you to look into this for yourself and be able to be knowledgeable on this topic and see that we need to know as Christians in order to get our worldview across in a way and respond to worldviews that don't agree with ours in a great way. Thank you.